You said your couple of sightings were in 1978. Do you want to just take me through from the beginning in as much detail as you can remember? I know there are two encounters there. So why don't we do the first one first, and then I might ask you a few questions, and then you can tell me about the second one.
My best recollection is about April, May in 1978. And I was living at Dunstown at the time. I'd just been out there about a year and met a girl. There's an old house directly opposite me at Warrenheip on the old Melbourne Road. It's derelict. And one of the old cockies down at the local pub one night said, if you want to put some work into the old house, you can maybe move in there. So that day of the sighting, we actually went up and had a look, and it was pretty derelict. The sheep had been living in it, and it was surrounded by massive pine trees with branches stuck out 20 feet. It was dark and it was very gloomy, and I didn't like the feel of it, to be honest. Well, we happened to go back that night. I think it was around between 10 and 12 of a night. It was quite a bright, starry night. In that time of the year, it was sort of a frosty feel about it. And we just happened to be parked to one side of the house in front of a bush. There was about a 2-metre bush, then a farm fence and another bush. Well, on the left-hand side of that we were parking, it was the old house. Like I said, it was a starry night. There's no moon, but you could see the side of the house lit up quite well. And we're just sitting, not really talking about anything, and all of a sudden out of the complete darkness came this shadow of a man, which I was totally in shock, because what was a person doing up there in a derelict house at that time of the night? But as it was walking, it was swaying from side to side, extreme sways really, not like a man where he sort of bob up and down. And I just was in awe of what was happening. So within a few seconds, I'm watching it and it disappeared. And for some reason, I expected someone to come around to the side of the car, but I was looking dead ahead. Had the radio going, or the radio was on. And within seconds, this massive silhouette of this black head popped up as if it seen me and ducked straight down again. And I shit myself, well and truly. Started that old FJ and out I went. Went up the road, and the girlfriend I was with at the time, we both said to each other, what the hell was that? It really scared us. Done a Yowie and head back to Dunstown, and I flew past there with the most horriblest bloody feeling I've ever had, because I didn't know what it was. My first instinct was a man, but it was too big. It was just a black, massive big silhouette. You could see the shoulders and the head sort of rolling from side to side. And then it obviously ducked down and came up in front of that bush. Well, I must have surprised it by looking straight at it. It was a real weird experience, and it sort of lived with me forever until I, looking at Dean's side, and it just all came back. And every time I think of it, I still get the chills after all those years.
After all these years?
Yeah. And it was directly opposite me on Warrenheip.
I'm actually just looking at a map of that right now. So is the house that was there still there? Still abandoned?
There. Yeah.
So on the old Melbourne Road, I can actually see there's one house there on the map.
There was no houses opposite it in them days, but there is a new one now.
Yep.
So it's changed a bit around that area. But that was sitting on its own, directly opposite the mount. And that mountain's very steep, and there's a lot of undergrowth and fallen trees. I've tried over the years to walk up there. It's nearly impossible, and it's a dark, eerie sort of a area. In those days, there was hardly any traffic around. The nearest farmhouse was probably half a k either side of it, and there was nothing around there. So I just thought it was so unusual. There was a man there, which looked like a man first. But my wife and I actually went back last year. It was up for sale, and she believes me what I say, and we went and had a look at it. And from my recollection, that top of that head was just below the spouting on that side of that house. I'm only 5'10". I only come up sort of about a bit over half of it. So then reality started to sink in. Now I know about it. It was definitely something out of the ordinary.
So how tall do you reckon that was, the spouting?
Well, 8.5 foot from the pathway to the bottom of the spout. This thing, whatever it was, now I've really thought about it over the years, It was just below the spouting. And its side-to-side movement was, a good 6-7 inches. It seemed to be swayed. It didn't look right. Further down the pathway, it was swaying from side to side, and I imagine it's only 2 or 3 steps, and then it disappeared. And then within a few more seconds, it popped up.
Were you looking at a shadow or a silhouette?
No, a full silhouette.
Full silhouette.
I couldn't see, say, below the hips or the waist. It was full on dark, and it just seemed to walk into the right brightness of the stars shining down the side of that house. It just seemed to glide in, but it was going from side to side. And as it got further down, it disappeared. And then the silhouette of this bloody big black round shape, which was a head and a tiny bit of its shoulders, it popped up as quick as anything and then just popped back down like it got a shock.
When it popped up in front of you, did you see a face?
There was just that full black silhouette of a head and a bit of a shoulder.
What about a neck? Did you see any neck?
No, there was just, if you imagine a shoulders and head into one black silhouette and then really quick down.
Did you get the impression that it was looking at you?
I definitely knew that it seen me staring at the top of this bush. I don't know why. I was anticipating something was going to happen. And of course you're in shock. You're seeing something. Your mind's trying to work out what was going to happen or what was going on. But I realised later on that it wasn't a man. It was just too big and it was just completely out of character, the way it walked.
Did it make any noise while it was walking or?
Just come out of that complete blackness of this back of this house into the light of the side of the building and just all of a sudden it was there. And it was just walking down. I really expected it to come down the passenger side of the car if it was a man hanging around there. But no, it cut across. I sort of lost sight of it and then the silhouette of this head pop up and then down really quick and that was the end of it. I was out of there. We didn't know what it was. We'd never heard of Yowies or anything like that. It was just so bizarre.
Had you heard of Bigfoot in the United States, for example?
No.
I mean, probably 1978 you probably hadn't.
No, there was nothing. The nearest thing I'd heard to something a bit strange was Black Panther sightings around that area, Creswick. There were sightings all the time, and it was actually months later, it was on the Ballarat News, there was a sighting at Mount Warrenheip. But I hadn't heard any of those things before, so I didn't know what it was.
You mentioned that you were feeling uneasy.
Yeah, it's just...
did that start earlier on in the day when you went to see the property?
Yeah, I really didn't like to feel the place because it was, even in daylight, it was so over-covered with branches of these pine trees surrounded the whole back of the house. It was cold, dark, and it just had a horrible feeling.
Yeah, and I imagine then if you were trying to start your car and it's not starting...
Yeah, it started, thank God, but I was pumping Alex. Within seconds I was praying it was going to start because I didn't know whether that thing bobbed down, it was going to come around the side of me, or it was just instant reaction to get out of there.
What did you guys do after you started the car and drove off?
I went up further up to towards Ballarat. There was a farmhouse up the top, and we just done a Yowie there, and I floored it because we had to go home. We lived at Dunstown, and I floored it past there. I didn't even look in. I was just petrified.
So you had to actually drive past the house again?
Yeah, and it was flat out. Some people shut these things out, don't they?
Yeah, they sure
do. I've never forgotten it, and you keep it to yourself. The next thing that happened sort of prompted me to think about it. We were talking about last year when we eventually got onto your show, and it just flooded back. I often have a dream about it at night, and I can see every little thing that happened.
So you're having dreams about it now since it's all come back?
Yeah, it just floods back, and I can remember that feeling still hits me, that here on the back of the neck feeling. Even just thinking about it now, it was quite bizarre.
I can understand how terrified you were.
Yeah, it's the weirdest things that ever happened to me, but we did have another instance a week later.
Yeah, so tell me about that one.
Well, that was just down the road at Terry's Road, about half a k down, heading towards Dunstown. We'd played footy that day. everyone went back to the local pub that night, and we're having a few beers, and someone suggested we go for a drive. So 5 of us piled into the old EH, and off we went, just telling jokes, and we had a few long necks with us, and we turned up there at Terry's Lane, just parked there, and we're still telling jokes, and it was a very frosty night. I reckon it was about 10 o'clock. I was sitting in the back, right-hand side in the back seat, and I thought I heard something outside, but we were making that much noise, laughing and carrying on, that I didn't take notice of it. Then all of a sudden, one of the guys in the front said, "There's someone out there." And we all went quiet, and you could hear, you have your foot on gravel and you turn it. It was that noise. And you could hear this almighty plodding of feet. And it was off. It was pitch black. We'd had our light on in the car because we were sort of looking at each other and sharing cigarettes and whatever. So our light was on in the car. 2 guys in the front, well, they headed off down the track, and myself and the 2 other guys, we were looking at the back window, and there was a big swipe across the left-hand side of the window. We sort of looked in there, wondering what it was. And I swiped the other side. This thing, whatever it was, this swipe was twice as big as my swipe of the ice, because the windows started to ice up quite a bit then. It was getting that sort of time of night. So we're sort of just in dumbfounded what was happening. And as I was looking at that, I heard the barbed wire twang like, I don't know if you've ever heard a cow go through a barbed wire fence, but it makes a hell of a noise, and it echoes right up through the fence. Within that, a second or 2 later, these 2 guys come running back, bloody petrified, yelling out, "Quick, get in the car, we've got to get out of here." So we all piled in, not knowing what's going on, headed back to the pub. One of the guys that was in the front that actually ran after it, he was on the verge of crying. He was really shaken up. He said it was a big man, and they couldn't catch it. And where we were parked was a good 250 metres from the actual road, and it just took off. They went probably 20, 30 metres and come back, and they were horrified. So we were talking it over at the pub, and one of the old locals sitting at the bar, he just chirped up and said, "Oh, it's probably a Yowie." And we're all saying, "Well, what's a Yowie? Never heard of it." "Oh, it's a hairy man." We couldn't comprehend what this was, so we spoke about the rest of the night and agreed to meet up the next day and just go back and have a look. So we did early in the morning. Where Old Melbourne Road comes down past that house, where Terry's Lane, there's a house there now, but there was nothing at the time. That was full on blackberries right to the creek. And you know when they die off, they're like a big dome. Well, there was a hole through it like a freight train had been through it. And hanging off the fence was all this red hair. And my thought was, oh, there's a cow's gone through there. So I've never seen a cow go through blackberries. They just don't do it. But all this long hair, reddish hair was hanging off the fence. So you just imagine it's the tail of the cow. So we just left it at that. No one spoke about it. We just sort of forgot all about it over the years. But I haven't. And I imagine some of the other guys, which I lost contact with, probably still think about it too, because it was quite a scary night. Going from being happy and jovial to all of a sudden someone was there spying on us and no one could catch it. Whatever it was went through that fence, and I think from the fence to the blackberries is about 15 feet, and there was a massive, like someone had drove a car through it. And I'd travel that road every night from work home, and those blackberries are always there. And ever since that, I'd always look at that and see that hole in there and always wonder what it was. Well, you actually heard the hand scrape on the back window, but sort of turning on the icy gravel, and you hear the ice go, and that's why we went straight to the back window, because someone swiped it to have a look in. When I done my swipe, it was very similar. The shape was like a hand swipe. The top of it was a bit sticking out further than the rest, but it was just one big swipe, nearly crossed one back half of the window, and we couldn't work out what it was.
It wasn't there a couple of hours beforehand?
No, definitely not. When these 2 guys ran off after whatever this was, the foot stomping was so loud. Whatever it was, it ran like the wind. And I imagine it had nowhere to go, because opposite that road was Mount Warrenheip, but there was about a 600-metre paddock before it actually hit the bottom of the mountain or where the bush started. So I think what I've come up with, it had nowhere to go but through those blackberries.
The hair that you saw, you said it was reddish. How long do you reckon it was?
Well, quite long. I reckon 3 or 4 or 5 inches. I can't really remember. I know it was quite long, and it sort of resembled a cow getting their tail in the fence where the hair pulls out. It was like that. There was quite a lot of it. There's none on any other part of the fence. It was just that particular part. And the barbed wire was quite sagged there in front of where that sort of hole was in the blackberries. And they weren't fresh blackberries. They were quite old, and they were just dead, and it was like just a tunnel through it. So that sort of put the creeps up us a bit when we seen that. And we're just analysing what actually had happened. And we still didn't think it was Yowie, so we didn't know what a Yowie was. That old guy mentioned Yowie in the pub, but it didn't mean anything because we didn't know actually what was going on. I bet you if I catch up with a few of them blokes now, they'd have the same story. It was a really scary night. Those 2 guys that chased us said it was a big man. And they come back like their tail between their legs. They were shitting themselves. Like I said, one guy was virtually crying. He was that petrified. And they couldn't catch it. It was just gone.
Did they give any other description other than just looked like a big man? A big head? No, did you say hairy man?
No, they just said it was a big man because it was quite dark. It was very black. I don't know whether they just picked it up as it was getting away from them, the size of it. The old cocky that was sitting at the bar when we were talking about it, he said, it was probably a Yowie. And we said, what's a Yowie? And he said, it's a hairy man. And that was the first we'd heard of it. That particular word has stuck in my head more than anything, really.
Did the guy who was so frightened he was almost crying, did those 2 boys who ran after the creature say why they felt so frightened?
Because of the size of it. Right. It was a big man, and the thought of us all cramped in that car and someone looking at us or spying on us, and that's another thing. It was only a week after I'd seen that scary episode up at the house just up the road.
Back in the car, you guys are all chatting away, sharing some long necks. Do you remember what you were talking about before?
We had one of the guys in the front was a real prankster, and he was full of jokes, and he was just telling us jokes, and we were laughing and just having a good old time, really. We hear those footsteps.
Were you noticing movement out of your corner of your eye?
We had the light on in the car, so everything was black outside. Someone had turned the light on so we could light our cigarettes or whatever, but that was on the whole time. I distinctly heard the foot movements outside as it turned. It was quite loud. The guy in the front said, what the hell's that? There's someone out there. And we went dead quiet, and you could hear it. And then you could hear the swipe on the back of the window. And we knew then we just bailed out, but it was gone.
So you heard the noise and then it swiped to have a look, but you didn't see any face of a creature looking in the window?
No, because it was too dark outside, and the guy in the front that was a bit upset about it, he was actually facing me, but he didn't see anything. But you could hear it quite well because the frost had started to settle in. It was just swipe. You could hear that frosty sound on the back like you would when you wipe the window. Of course, when I done it, my swipe was only half as big, and we just sort of trying to comprehend what done that. And then when I heard that barbed wire twang, seen plenty of cows go through fences and they make a noise, but this was way beyond it. So we just didn't know what it was. And in panic, went back to the pub to sort of calm ourselves down and try and figure out what it was. Didn't have an idea till this old guy suggested it was a Yowie, which we didn't know about. That sort of lived with me ever since, and I'm sure there's a few others. A couple other guys have passed on, but I'm sure the other guys would think of it as well because it was such out of the ordinary thing that happened.
You mentioned in your email, your original report, that a couple of years ago you ran into one of the guys in the car that night and that he still vividly remembers it.
Yeah.
Which guy was he? One of the guys that ran after the creature?
Yeah, I didn't want to talk about it at all. I ran into him at the footy. I used to go back to the footy now and then, and didn't want to talk about it. I think he was the one that shaken up. I thought, well, it made me feel easy because I hadn't stopped thinking about it. I thought, well, someone else is thinking the same thing, so it wasn't just me.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people around the country who have experiences like that and never forget it. Remember it vividly 20, 30, 40 years later even.
I've only just recently retired, and an old mate of mine lived at Gordon that works up where I worked and used to come down to my workshop for chat. I don't know, I just had this one day I said, look, have you ever heard of a Yowie? And he laughed at me, which most people do. He said, no, bloody bullshit. Oh, left it go, let it at that. Well, a week later he came back down. And out of the blue he said, you know what you asked me last week about that Yowie? He said, I seen one. You were joking. He said, yeah. I never told my wife, I never told anyone, and I don't want you to bloody tell anyone either. He said he was cutting wood at Mount Edgerton, which is sort of south of Gordon.
Yep, I know where it is, yep.
No, he was cutting wood there. I'm not sure what part, but it's quite thick bush there and it's undulating ground. It's beautiful there. I used to do a lot of shooting there. He was cutting wood. He just tied his load up and he just happened to look up and there's this big hairy bloke standing about 50 metres from him, just staring at him with one hand on a branch. He never twigged. He never moved a muscle. He just he sort of looked at it for a few seconds, calmly got in his car and took off.
How long ago was that?
That was in 1978.
Right.
So I was glad I asked him in the end.
Isn't that interesting? So same year as yours.
He wouldn't talk about it. I think he just wanted to tell me, and that was it. He made me promise not to tell anyone.
Most people who have experiences like this, if the general population laugh and ridicule, it's pretty awful, really, because people like you are genuinely traumatised and frightened.
Yeah.
And it's really hard, I think maybe particularly for men.
Yeah. Yeah, and he just come back and told me out of the blue, and only because I asked him the week before. He must have thought about it. He said it was big, it was hairy, it was a man. I was standing there watching him, and he said he didn't know what the hell it was. Right. So that's Mount Edgerton. There's a corridor from Mount Edgerton right through to Dunstan because I've done a lot of shooting there. This area is
coming quite active at the moment, so which is exciting for us.
Yeah, because I often said to my wife, look, I'm going to have to ride into me because I'm sure there must be something around our area because we're surrounded by heavy bush. And I knew my experience. I knew that was true. And I thought, there's got to be something. That's why I thought I'll send this in. Hopefully it'll prompt someone else to say, look, I've seen something else.
There's also Red Bank, which is not too far, sort of northwest, and Natty Alec up near Avoca. And that was 2008. Bendigo, 2010-11. We actually had someone write in and said she saw one in Creswick on that road that heads up from between Ballarat and Creswick. She decided she didn't want to go ahead and make a report. She was concerned that it might affect Creswick property prices. So we respect her wishes and we haven't included it in our database, but it was basically citing one on the side of the road.
I'm so wrapped in the show and I'm really intrigued by it. I thought there's got to be more to this area.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I get it off the chest because I only really talk to my wife. My kids laugh at me a bit.
You don't feel frightened about being out in the bush anymore?
No. It wasn't until years later that I started shooting and all I done was work and bring up your kids. You don't sort of think of those things. But as I got older, I started to think about it more. And then it wasn't until I was looking through YouTube one night and seen Yowie, and I thought, gee, I'll have a look at that. And that just brought it all flooding back because I believe everything on there and it's fantastic. We were listening to it in bed this morning, actually, and that was really scary, that poor bugger.
Cat-eye?
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Poor guy. It's an absolutely terrifying experience.
It sounds like it's ruined him from going in there. So I didn't have that experience, but it was scary enough what I'd seen.
I'm interviewing someone in the next couple of days who mentioned that they used to go bushwalking all the time, like 30 years worth of bushwalking. After their very frightening experience, they have never gone bushwalking again. Lots of people like that. They're so frightened they can't bring themselves to do it.
Yeah, can understand that. You look at the bush in a different way.
Yeah.
Look, it's been great talking to you. I've been looking forward to it.
Been great talking to you too, Geoff. And as I said, I really, really appreciate you coming forward. The more people we can have coming forward, the more evidence we can document, the more people out there we can show, look, you're not alone. There's all these other people who've had this similar experiences, and the more we can build up knowledge of sightings. There's so many all the way up Great Dividing Range, New South Wales, Queensland. I'm not quite sure why there are more up there and less down here, but I think the more people who got those experiences like you but have never come forward, even though it's a long time ago, it's still really important to document.
Years ago, I spent a lot of time in the Wombat Forest and around Trentham and Dartford and that bush is just so thick.
There's another one in Trentham. We have Domino's Track in Trentham.
Yeah, so we were tracking all those when you were telling your stories, and my wife and said, look, it seems to be getting closer. I think it's time you told them what you're saying might prompt someone else.
Yeah.
But here, hopefully it does. But if not, it was just good to tell the story because, not many people believe that I think you're a bloody wacko. Yeah, I love watching Dean's show because it's just, you can comprehend everything that people are going through. You can feel the fear in their voices. No, it's not bull because no one can make up stories like that. And we can't, myself and my wife, we can't wait till the next one comes out.
That's really good to hear. I do a weekly radio show on the local radio station here in Castlemaine called Main FM. And I do a Yowie show once a week if you're interested in listening. 10 o'clock Wednesday mornings. And it's 94.9 Main FM. You can stream it through your phone every Wednesday at 10 o'clock.